All right, so welcome to a very special mini-sode with the Unfinished TBR. I'm Hannah, and this here is my wonderful father. This is Rusty Smith, everybody. Special guest, Rusty Smith. And also, we are filming this on March 6th, which is his birthday. So
Well, happy birthday to me.
yes, happy birthday to you. We've got milkshakes to celebrate.
Yes, we do.
And a good book to discuss.
Yes.
So what could possibly be better? That sounds like a killer combination.
I can't think of a better birthday.
I can't think of a better way to spend your birthday either. So thanks for letting me come barge in on your night.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be part of this mini cast. What did you call it?
It's a mini-sode.
Mini-sode.
So we're going to, we've already discussed this book a little bit on the actual episode, but this is going to be our in-depth discussion because actually, I don't know if I mentioned it in the full episode, Dad is the one that recommended this book to me. You knocked it out of the park. I'm actually mad at myself for not jumping on this recommendation sooner because you recommended it
Yes, I did. Yes.
6 months ago, even before we started the podcast.
Probably longer than that.
Last summer.
But I read the book 2 or 3 years ago, and the book was a book I purchased in the Knoxville McGee Tyson Airport.
Really?
Yes, it wasn't even recommended to me. Okay,
That's insane.
And I looked at the back and just saw what it was about, and I thought, that sounds pretty interesting.
Right.
And a funny story on why I was even buying a book in an airport is because Mom and I had some problems on the flight out to where we were going. So the airline gave us some credits to use at the airport.
And you used it on I am your daughter. I am your daughter.
I used it on a couple of books there in the Knoxville McGee Tyson Airport. So a very unlikely way to obtain this book and read it because it never has been recommended to me. I just took a chance on it.
That's crazy. Yeah. Oh, that makes me love it even more because I was like, and that was going to be one of my questions to you was who recommended this to you.
Oh, okay.
But
sorry to get ahead of you.
Oh no, that's so interesting. Like you never know what gems you're going to find.
That's true.
Ever. All right, so we do have some discussion questions here. So I'm assuming, let's start down here at the bottom.
Yes.
I'm assuming since you just happened upon this book and got it, you haven't read anything else by Kelly Romer?
That's correct. I have not.
Okay, I haven't either, but she's got a couple more that look kind of like this genre where it's the historical fiction, which I'm assuming you're probably a big fan of that.
I'm a very big fan of that. Yes, it gives the writer freedom to be a little creative. It is true that reality is sometimes hard to beat. It's better than fiction. You know, you hear the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up."
Right.
all that's true. However, that being the case, when the writer has a little bit of freedom and latitude to add a few details here and there, it does make for a more interesting story sometimes.
That is true. That is true. What do you remember most about The German Wife?
What I remember most is how it was an informal history lesson of a period that spanned about 3 decades in the 20th century. I felt like if you knew a little bit about the rise of the Nazi regime, the persecution of the Jews, the Depression era, the Dust Bowl, if you knew a little bit about that and knew a little bit about World War II, then you were immediately sucked into this.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And if you didn't know anything about that, it would be hard to get sucked into the book. But if you knew a little bit about it, then all of a sudden this becomes almost a history lesson, a 3-decade history lesson.
Yes.
And not just American history, but world history. And so that's what struck me. And I am somewhat of a history buff. I love it and enjoy. I'm very. I've always liked the phrase, "Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it.
Yes.
I've always liked that phrase because it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn so much, not just through our own experiences and mistakes. We can learn so much through our predecessors' experiences and mistakes.
Yes.
So that's what really struck me. And as I was reading, it was like, this is so cool. This is a history lesson, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that
just an entertaining one.
That. Yes. Yes.
I knew about Operation Paperclip, like just mainly the fact that it happened. And I didn't really understand the significance of it. Oh, well, Germans, came over here to help us with our rocket production, yes, or rocket science and everything. And okay, well, Germany was over with, so no big deal. But to read this book and get into the mind of somebody who is a neighbor to, I mean, I can see where that would have been a little bit of a struggle.
Yes.
For everybody around. I mean, we literally just got out of a war with these people, and you're inviting them into our home.
Right. And I knew also just a very small amount about Operation Paperclip. Mm-hmm. I knew about everything else, the Dust Bowl. Mm-hmm. I knew very little about the Black Sunday. I knew there was one particular weekend where the Dust Bowl became very intense and it really wreaked havoc. I didn't know that they called it Black Sunday. But I knew about the rise of the Nazi ideology before World War II. I knew about the U.S. rocket project afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I knew that we had used German scientists in that. But what I did not realize is how that all came about, how that they got a certain number of them got immunity of being persecuted for war crimes and different things in exchange for their knowledge and their expertise and their helping with their program. That I did not know. Right. And so, yes, in reading a little bit about history after I read this book, yes, it makes the feelings that the author puts into these two women even more real because we're not robots.
No.
And so the German wife herself, she knew well, I'm getting a little ahead, but she knew firsthand experience of the fact that she did not just choose this life.
No.
She was a very good person. Her husband was a very smart man, a lot of promise, and they at some point had some decisions to make that they really didn't ever expect to have to make. So.
Oh yeah, I know. They even say they are so set on not falling into that they're willing to give up their lives for it. Mm-hmm. It's when the kids get brought into the mix that they're like, it's not worth that. Right. It's not worth that. Because they could have died if they'd stuck with just them. They could have died knowing that the next generation still has hope. Because there are people still sticking up for the old ways. Right. So, but knowing that they were going to take the children next. Right. I can't say I blame them at all.
Yeah, and one of the discussion questions here is, was there a point where they could have avoided their fate? And was there a right time to take a stand? And if so, when was that moment? And I've thought about that question, and I'm thinking it all depends on your end goal and what you're willing to sacrifice. If the end goal was to make a statement, regardless of how you were going to be persecuted or maybe even put to death, if that's your end goal is to make that statement, then yeah, many times during the process they could have made that statement, they could have done that, but they knew what the outcome would be. And So I don't know if there was any time that was better than the other. I don't. They hit a point. I think they felt like it's not going to end well no matter what.
Right.
If they stick with what's happening and they don't take a stand, it's not going to end well.
Right.
For their friends, for Germany as a country, etc., for the world. But if they take a stand, it's not going to end well on their behalf. So I don't know. Do you think there was a certain time?
I really don't, because the fact of the matter is, and it would go all the way back to even further than it reached in the book when he decided to go into rocket science. I think that sealed his fate.
Yes, I think you're right.
I mean, and like, never could have guessed that. At that time, they were such a small party that it was like, they weren't even on the map yet.
Right.
So there's no way they could have seen the outcome, but I think that sealed the deal. He was just so smart of a guy. They needed him on their side.
Right. I think you're right. Yeah. And, you know, Hitler recognized talent for all of his faults and all of his sinister ways and his evil. He did recognize talent. He knew that he had to have people like that, and he was not beyond coercing people like that, no matter what, no matter how he had to do it. So,
and therein lies the problem.
Therein lies the problem. Yes.
Is he's willing to do anything to keep those people in his circle, even threaten their own families. Yeah,
and there's a lot of irony here. You may or may not know this, but toward the end of World War II is when the planes, the fighter planes, transitioned. The U.S. fighter planes were starting to transition from propeller-driven planes to jet planes. The Germans actually, because they were very intelligent and their engineers were very brilliant, just like Jurgen was, but because they were brilliant, they developed a jet engine. And the American pilots actually saw a couple of these. And they reported back. This was toward the end of the war, before the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They reported back that the Germans have this, and if they perfect this and they beat us to the punch on these jet engines, we don't stand a chance as far as fighter pilots go. Right. We don't stand a chance.
It wouldn't be able to keep up.
The speed was so much better that it was incredible, the difference between propeller-driven planes and jet-driven planes, jet engine-driven planes. So the irony is that Germany was very advanced in not just the rocket science, but the jet fighter pilot or fighter plane. And in the end, they could not use that to their advantage. They made some other mistakes and it just, I guess, goes to prove. We like to think good always wins, and in this case, good did win out, and we just had a lot of things go our way. God had His hand in it, obviously, right. But they were very intelligent people, I should say. Jurgen here is not a lone wolf in the Germany brain trust, I should say.
Right. It's an interesting thought.
It is an interesting thought. Absolutely.
And how quickly things could have gone so much differently.
Yes. That is so true. So true.
All right. What else we got here, Dad? Oh, I did want to mention, I read this. I can't believe I forgot to mention it on the episode, but I read this while I was in Huntsville, Alabama.
No way.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
You were in Huntsville, Alabama.
I was in Huntsville, Alabama for work.
Yes.
And I started this book. I was on the drive to Chattanooga. And I was like, well, I'll start this book. And so I start the book, and it's like Huntsville, Alabama. I'm like, I'm going there tonight. I was like, and I finished it the next day on my way back.
Gotcha.
And
That's perfect.
yeah. I stayed like within a mile of the Rocket Center or whatever. Yeah.
Really? Did you go by the Rocket Center?
Oh yeah, I travel by every single time. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that is
but
awesome.
it like clicked this time because I was reading this book.
That's funny. You should tell me that, because I read a book on a trip to China one time and back on business. The book, you see it in our dining room in there, The Factory Man.
How crazy is that?
And it happens to be that this book, The Factory Man, this whole book is around John Bassett. I think is Bass or Bassett. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read. But Bassett Furniture, a lot of folks have heard of. Well, this whole book is around that man, and it is a true story.
Oh, that's cool.
But I read it on. It was a very long plane trip, as you can imagine.
Oh,
to
yeah.
China. Very long plane trip back, and I read just about the entire book while I was going to Asia.
That is so cool.
So yeah,
it makes it hit a little bit differently.
It
you
really
know,
does. It really does.
Even something as little as like the weather being the same as what's in a book can just like heighten the entire experience.
Yes.
But to actually be in the place that they're talking about, oh my gosh, that next level.
Well, I want to ride with you on business one time down to Huntsville, and let's go through the Rockets.
Let's do it. Okay. Let's do it. Especially since we've read this book.
Yes.
Be looking for a vlog. Me and Dad. Yeah. George and Laura become indoctrinated with Nazi ideology via their school and Hitler Youth activities. Did you know this happened in Nazi Germany? What do you think you would do if this was happening to your children?
The answer is yes. I did know that happened in Nazi Germany, and
I didn't know it was that extreme, though.
Very, very strong indoctrination to the young folks, and brown shirts, I think they called them sometimes, and they would dress a certain way. It was more like a military uniform, and so I did know that happened, and that the question of what would you do if that was your children, there again, it depends on how much you are willing to sacrifice,
right?
And we think it would be easy, you know. One of the notes I took on this particular question was I would start homeschooling my children. Right. Immediately if I found this out. Well, that would work in America because we have the freedom to homeschool our children if we so choose. But you've been to Germany, and you know, and we know from experiences of Germans who have moved over here, even now in 2025, it is against the law to homeschool your children in Germany. Unfortunately, unless the law's changed over the last couple years, it's against the law. So I don't know what the law was during the 1930s when the Nazism was gaining so much traction. I don't know what the law was.
I can't imagine it would be more lenient than it is right now.
I can't imagine it either. Yeah.
I feel like that they would have it in a chokehold back then, but I might be wrong.
You would think, and even if it was lawful to do that, they kept tabs on everybody.
Right.
And they wanted to keep tabs on everybody because they wanted to know who was German and who was. What do they call it? Aryan descent.
Yes.
As opposed to Jewish descent. And so they kept tabs on everybody. So if you pulled your child or children out of school, the authorities would have known about it. And so even if it would have been lawful, it would have been tough. But that is such a tough question because it's kind of like Sophie and Jürgen. How much are you willing to sacrifice? That's what it boils down to.
Oh, gosh. The scene where they were like running around with the friends' kids too, and they were playing Jew versus Nazi.
Yeah. Yes.
How problematic. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And they just think it's some big game.
Yes.
And the thing is, Jurgen and Sophie didn't teach them that. They learned it from school.
Right.
Which is terrifying.
Right. And here again, this is a fictional book,
Mm-hmm.
but I guarantee that scene played out time after time after time in
Guaranteed.
1930s Germany. And the book didn't say much about it, but this might be a good time to inject this. What makes the decision on when to stand and up and when to take a stand for the right thing becomes more difficult when you realize that 1930s, not only was the U.S. going through a depression, the whole world was going through a depression. And there's nothing like a depression and economic disparity to get people to latch on to something they think is going to make things better.
Yeah.
Hitler and the Nazi Party were masters at that. So it's easy to say, well, if this couple would take a stand and their neighbors would take a stand and their neighbors take a stand, that together collectively they could have made a difference. But when people are suffering economically and a political party is promising better times, it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. So it's a good reason to I don't know. This gets into a pep talk for my children, that one of which I'm sitting here. Always work hard and always take care of yourself and make sure you're financially, financially not independent, but financially viable, that you can make decisions not based on your economic status.
Right.
You can make them on what's right and what's good for you, what's
Right.
good for your family. So it's a good reason to always work hard. Not that the Germans did not. It was
Right.
it was a worldwide depression.
Yeah.
But when you get in desperate economic times, you have fewer choices.
Yes.
That's a fact.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And that was a prime example
Prime example.
of
yes.
I mean, they didn't think they had anywhere else to turn. The Nazi Party was saying all the right things
Right.
that they needed to hear at that time. I do think that Lizzie made mistakes taking care of Henry, though. I will say that. I think she waited too long to try to get him proper help.
Probably.
For him to get to the point where he couldn't differentiate his dreams and reality, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh. And to think, I mean, obviously she didn't know that he was out stalking this
Right.
German family
Right.
while she was at work. And like, she probably, even when she saw hints, she didn't want to believe it.
Right.
And I can't say that I wouldn't be the same way with Daniel, because
Right.
I wouldn't want to face that. I wouldn't want to face that Daniel's not the same person anymore, So
And-
I don't blame her.
Right.
I still don't think it was the right thing to do, though.
And that was many years ago when medical science and psychiatric medication is not as good as it is now.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't have a feeling one way or the other on that, because I don't know enough about that field,
Right.
that part of the medical field.
Right.
So-
And they didn't either at that time.
They didn't either, yeah.
I mean, what was it that they were trying to do? Like shock therapy or something on him?
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
Lord.
It's almost as bad as when they would draw blood from somebody in the late 1700s and early 1800s,
Yes.
thinking that was helping their medical problem.
Yeah.
Drain them of blood.
Drain them to get the virus out of them.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah. Golly. I'm so glad
Yeah.
that
I guess that's why they call it medical practice, right?
practice will
Yeah.
eventually make perfect, right?
Yeah. We're always practicing.
That's one of the things. Like I'm, me. I've got place in my heart for that time period. I love the aesthetics of the time period. I love it. But
you're talking about the late 1700s?
No.
Or are you talking about the mid-century?
The mid-century.
20th century, yes.
I've got a soft place in my heart for that time period. But man, I'm so glad we've got some of the comforts that we've got now, including
Yes.
good medical practices most of the time.
Yes, most of the time, yeah.
All right. Okay. You were excited to tell me about this. So let's hear it. Which characters in this book did you like the best?
Well, yes, I was a little excited because I think it's going to be unexpected.
Uh-huh.
But the character I got engrossed with, I don't know if it's my favorite, but the one I got most engrossed with and got inside her head is Sophie, the
Really?
actual German wife.
Nice.
Yes. And
I respect that. I think I'm in the same boat.
oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
Well,
I wouldn't have expected that from you, though. That's very interesting. I like it.
well, it's a little odd, I guess, but Sophie, I don't know, because she was not the expert scientist.
Mhm.
She was not the rock star in the scientific field.
Right.
She had to deal with the fact that he was,
Right.
her husband was. She had to deal with that. She had to deal with the fact that he really made the ultimate decision on whether or not to accept the jobs, turn down the jobs. He had to make the ultimate decision. So she was left with dealing with things that she almost had no control over.
Right.
And he did as well, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
but he ultimately had to make those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
To either accept the jobs, accept the promotions, or not to accept them and go down a road where the Nazis would pinpoint him. And so she's dealing with all this, and she's not the rock star scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's dealing with the children that she's worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Then she's dealing with, I don't know, how long was it that he was in the States before she...
5 years.
5 years. She dealt with that.
Mm-hmm.
And...
right after the death of their son.
Right.
She basically had to mourn on her own because almost directly after that is when they came for Jurgen to take him to the States.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine.
And so, me being a businessman and somewhat in the engineering field, you might think, well, Jurgen is the one that my favorite character.
Right.
All right. Because he got to work on some cool things.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was pardoned, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in a position where his mind stayed busy.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed occupied. He stayed, if he had time to think, which he did, about these things, he quickly dismissed them because he was on a higher mission.
Right.
Technically.
Right.
Sophie, the actual German wife, which the book is named after, I do understand. The author probably had the option of naming it the German wife, the competing wives, the Rocket Man. She could have named the book a lot of different things, but I think it is so. The German wife herself, Sophie. I guess that's my favorite character. I got engrossed in her life more than I got engrossed in anybody else's life in the book.
I got really into Liz's too, though. I did. I was very from the first chapter with her in it. With the her first chapter is the cows are continuously they're taking a path that is not doesn't make any sense to her, and she's like, okay, if they're going to do it that way, then I'm going to make it to where I'm not having to work to pull them out of the mud every single day. And she spends the entire few days digging a trench for them so that they don't get stuck in the mud. That's so interesting to me. That just from the get-go, her mind was working to fix things. It's just
Yes.
constantly, she's a fixer.
She's a fixer. She's such a tomboy
Yes.
type person as well, and she is an interesting character. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, Sophie definitely
Yeah.
takes the cake.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so they're both interesting. But yes, to answer the question, which character did I like best? Don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I did get more engrossed in Sophie's life than any life in the book.
Mm-hmm. It was very interesting.
Yes.
What about who did you like the least, or were you the least interested in?
A guy with a little short mustache named Hitler. No.
Yeah, I hate that guy.
Well, it's been a while since I read the book, but I'm trying to think of maybe who I liked the least. There was someone that came around checking on Jurgen and Sophie that put pressure on them.
Yes, in Germany.
Yes, while in Germany.
His friend that got him into that initially, the one with the kids where the kids were playing the.
Yes, and like I said, it's been a long time since I read the book, but I do remember, and I can't even remember his name. But
Me neither.
But I remember that person, okay, that was putting pressure on Jurgen. Not saying do this or else, but he would do it in a sly way.
Strongly imply.
Yes, it's sort of like the Godfather movie when they would say, well, he made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Yes.
And so that's basically what Jurgen
Oh,
got.
that was the boss, not the friend. That was the boss. But I didn't like the friend either.
Okay. But yeah, I think you're right. It's the boss. And
because he did have a very Godfather. Like, even,
Right.
I listened to this. So even though the author didn't, or the narrator didn't, like, make a voice or anything, they definitely sounded a little bit Italian mafia,
yeah.
mob boss type. He had that voice in my head.
It had the
You know?
Marlon Brando
Yes.
rough voice in your head. Yes.
Yes.
And so yeah, I guess that's my least character.
Yeah, I could not stand him. Every time he came into the scene, it felt like it's like he was constantly looking over everybody's shoulder.
Right.
Just looking what you're into, you know,
Right.
and it's like icky.
Right, and we've always been free in our country, and we've never had that big brother that we felt like was always looking at us, and always we've never had to look over our shoulder for our privacy or for our freedom. So that's strange to us, and it doesn't sit well with us. And so yeah, he's my least favorite.
Yeah, but the friend, and I can't remember his name right now either. He's right up there with because do you remember the ending with him?
I do not.
He ran off, like, just completely left his wife and his kids to deal with the consequences, and just ran away.
Ran away with the Nazi party, or running away from the Nazi party?
Away from.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
left his wife and kids.
Okay, I had forgot about that part.
Oh my gosh, that was rage inducing.
Yeah.
I was like, Matthew would never. I am Sophie, Matthew is Jurgen. He would never run off without me.
Right.
Make a decision like that and leave her to deal with the consequences. How selfish can you be?
Agreed.
When you're the one that made those decisions.
Yep.
Like, he was the head of the household.
But I'm sure that was a story that was repeated as well.
Oh, yeah.
In Nazi Germany toward the end of the regime.
When they started seeing that they were losing.
Right.
I'm sure there were some people that hightailed it out of there.
Yes.
And do you think he might have gotten pardoned, though, if you think about it, because he was right there with Jurgen.
He may have.
He wasn't willing to take that chance.
You know, the thing that Jurgen didn't know up to a certain point is that there was a chance for a pardon.
Right.
And so these folks in Jurgen's shoes, and like I said, he didn't have the market cornered on intellect and brain. He wasn't the Lone Ranger in a brain trust in Germany. They had some very intelligent people. So, and they were all in the same boat. That they would have had no way of knowing halfway through World War II that, hey, if I just keep my nose clean here, the Americans or the winner, whoever it is, will want me, and I'll get a pardon for what I've contributed to the Nazi cause. So they had no way of knowing that. So I'm sure there are many stories like this friend you're talking about. They saw the writing on the wall. They thought that it was not going to be good. They were going to be put to death, firing squad, war crimes, et cetera, et cetera. So that I'm sure was a story repeated many times.
Yeah, which I think he was more encompassed in the concentration camps and everything too. Like he had a bigger role in those, I feel like, which might have been dealt with more severely.
Yes.
I think Jurgen was just in the one labor camp for the parts and stuff. Yes. Which scene, do you remember a scene that affected you more than the others?
I think it's a tie between two scenes. There is a certain point that Jurgen realizes in his career that it's not enough that I'm intelligent and I'm climbing the ladder at the university and I'm doing well. That's not enough. There's some ulterior motives by the Nazi Party when he realizes that he's going to have to compromise something. That kind of stood out to me. Okay, number one. So that's,
you can see the walls closing in on him.
Yes, and we have those in our own life. We have those moments to where, okay, there's a crossroads here. And I guess at my age, I've been through plenty of crossroads now. So that stood out at me as a very interesting part of the book.
Because you can feel that. I feel like everybody can resonate with that to some level. Obviously, his was much larger than any of mine's ever been, but I know that feeling of, where do I go from here? What's the right path to take from here? Because it just feels like there's no good options.
Yes. And here again, it's been a long time since I read the book, but when Sophie comes to America and then they hit a point, if I remember right, to where the neighbors that are part of the community, the scientific community there all together, there comes a point where the neighbors have an aha moment that these folks might have been involved with concentration camps, with a lot of bad things. And that's a point where we use the phrase, when the rubber meets the road. Yeah. That's a point to where, all right, there's going to be some consequences here if folks don't calm themselves down, act rationally, have a forgiving heart, an understanding heart, and don't communicate. All right, this is not going to end well. And so I think that point where those American neighbors, and I forget exactly how it came about, whether Lizzie was the first one to start recognizing that, hey, do we know who our neighbors are here? Right. Well, was it Lizzie or somebody else?
Well, I think so. Lizzie had that part or had that moment at the party where the Americans started listening to her and being like, yeah, why did we invite them over here? And but then there was another part where the Germans themselves, they were already in their own little isolation, but then they started to realize how high up Jurgen had been, and suddenly she got isolated. Even out of that isolation, she got isolated even more.
Right.
She couldn't even rely on the people that she had been in the same country with, like that she had just been isolated with, that they started turning on her too. She had no friends.
I forgot about that part, but that's that part, that you read certain parts, and if you put yourself in their shoes, which is the great thing about a book or a movie, if you can put yourself in those shoes,
yes,
and try to experience that, those two parts, those two parts that I just named, those are the parts that are gut wrenching. We call it, where it's decision time here.
Yeah,
this is a big decision time, or this is all right. This is a consequence time.
Right.
All right, there's consequences for what I've done, and here it comes.
Yeah.
And that's gut wrenching in itself.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's the tie between those two.
See, I had two scenes as well.
Oh really? What
yes.
were your scenes?
So mine were, okay, so one was a flashback. Actually, they were both part of the flashbacks. But one was when the Jewish neighbor that they had in their neighborhood in Germany, when he got taken, and they were basically like treating his house like a playground, adults and children. Like a teacher brought her class to come see where the Jewish man lived. And there were people going through his stuff. There was a mom like encouraging her kid to like smash up stuff in the house, all because it was a Jewish person's property. And suddenly he was gone. And you know what? Let's put him in his place. Yeah. Like that really stuck out to me. And it stuck out to Sophie too. Like it was more of that, what have we gotten ourselves into?
Yes.
It's seeing a lot of the monstrosities.
Yes.
Things that you don't really hear talked about. Whenever you hear about Nazi Germany, it's always the concentration camps, and which I'll get on that in a second. But the second scene was right after they got out of prison and they got back home. Well, she got back home, and he went back to to wherever he was working. And he gives her a call and says, "Honey, I've got great news. I've been invited to become an SS officer." And you can hear, and the narrator did such a good job of expressing it too. You can hear it's just words to him. Like he has mentally clocked out. Right. And he's as broken as that is the most broken he is in the book. And she's just as broken because she knows that wouldn't be their choice unless they absolutely had to. And they had to because of the kids, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
So just hearing that heartbreak and knowing there's nothing he could have done to stop it, man, that one sticks out to me.
And you had the benefit, if you will, of listening to the audio.
Yes.
book, and I was reading it, and I had actually forgot about both of those scenes that you just mentioned. And it reminds me of something that President Eisenhower, who was General Eisenhower at the time, General Eisenhower, who later became President Eisenhower, he was the commanding general of the Allied forces.
Right.
When they started coming upon these concentration camps, at the point where the Germany finally surrendered and they started coming upon these concentration camps, he instructed his media folks to take as many videos and to take as many pictures and do as much documentation as possible because he said there will come a time in the future people will not believe that this even happened.
Right.
And so I say that to say this. You talk about the scene where that they take the children through a Jewish house to almost like a spectacle, almost like going through a zoo.
That's exactly what it felt like.
And so you think, well, that surely didn't happen.
Right.
Well, yes, it probably did.
It probably did.
It probably did. If they would put a race of people like the Jews in concentration camps,
why wouldn't they go into their house?
Right. That tells you their thoughts on what they thought of that race of people. So if they thought that, then yes, going through their house and treating it like a zoo was nothing compared to what happened at the concentration camp.
Exactly.
So yes, for folks that may think, did that really happen? Well, there's plenty of video evidence and pictures and documentation that says it does. Thanks in great part to General Dwight Eisenhower, who foresaw that.
Good for him.
That there'll be denial of this in the future. This is so bad that if I hadn't seen it myself, I might doubt whether it actually happened. And so, yes, good for him. And sure enough, in my lifetime, I have heard folks say that it really didn't happen like that.
Really?
I have, yes. A few years ago, the Iranian president was one. And I don't think he's the president now. He actually was invited to, I think it was Columbia University in New York City. And in his address or speech to some of the students there, he expressed doubts about the Holocaust. Yes, believe it or not, yes. And that's been in my lifetime.
That's wild.
And maybe, I don't know if it's, I think you were born.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. So yes, I have experienced what Eisenhower feared.
Right.
I have heard that, and American people have heard that from a foreign leader, a dictator, basically. And so I don't think he's the only one in the world that feels like that.
Probably not.
Probably not. So anyway, yes. That is a good scene. That, as far as a scene that affects you, it's good that affects you, because that is the, gosh, it's the pinnacle of racism.
Yes,
it really is.
Yes.
And I don't want to jump too much out of the book and onto today's current events, but in today's time, we have heard one political party criticize another and use the word Nazi. And the truth is, it's so offensive to the Jewish folks and descendants that actually did see so much persecution.
Yeah.
It's a slap in the face to call that we're saying either political party here in the States would be compared to the Nazis.
Yes.
It's not even close. It's not even a comparison, because no matter which party you're on right now, we still have our freedoms.
Yes.
We have all of our rights.
Yes. I do want to jump to the concentration camps a little bit. I touched on it just briefly with that first memory. So one thing that I mentioned in the full episode was the Holocaust Museum that I went to whenever I was younger, and how it was the 2-part museum, and I got into the movie portion, and like I couldn't handle it, and I had to step out. And then going to Auschwitz and walking through Auschwitz in Germany later on, like that stuff affects me so much. I didn't even think about the other side of what was going on. Like she walks through a concentration camp, the labor camp. She walks through one, which is already bad, but it focused on how that made her feel and how sad that made her, because that's not what her Germany was.
Right.
And it was a different take on the entire, like it was a bigger scope. It was almost like seeing the other side of a coin. Mm-hmm. Like you've only seen the one side and then you flip it over. Oh my gosh, there's a completely other side to this. That's just as horrific, really. So I really appreciated having that light shed on another side of things, because it wasn't good for all of Germany.
It was not. You're correct. It was not good for Germany either.
And heck, with Jurgen, it wasn't good for all the Nazis either.
No. And if Jurgen would have had his druthers, he would not have been separated from his wife and children for 5 years.
Right.
He would rather have practiced his scientific advancements with his family.
Right.
But because things happened like they did, it divided their family.
Right.
Here again, it's fiction, but the Operation Paperclip did exist.
Exactly.
I'm sure these stories are pretty close to what actually happened in many families.
Yes.
So, for the listeners, here again, this is ironic that we are talking about this. I happened to be on that Washington, D.C. trip with you when you went through the Holocaust
couldn't remember
Museum.
if it was you or Mom. Were you satisfied with the ending that everybody got?
Well, I accept the Indians how they are.
Yeah.
Your mother, Darlene, and I, when we watch a movie, half the movies that end, she looks at me like, "Are you serious?" And I always say, well, it's got to end sometime. They can't keep the story going.
Right.
Ending, and it's not always where you would like it, because life doesn't end up a fairy tale.
Right.
So I look at endings. I don't look at endings as good or bad. They have to stop the storytelling at some point. So,
that was the point for the storytelling to end. Yeah. I do feel bad for Cal. He was so obviously in love with Lizzie, and she just never reciprocated.
Never reciprocated, and that was that might have affected why I got more involved with Sophie rather than Lizzie, because I guess I am a romantic at heart, and it's sad to me that a husband and wife are not also soulmates.
I know.
But no doubt it's repeated many places in our society. But Sophie, it was obvious she was dedicated to Jurgen.
Yes. That was such a good relationship.
Yes, and he was dedicated to her.
Yes.
And so maybe that's one reason, because you're right. I had forgot about the relationship between Cal and Lizzie. But it wasn't what I would call a great marriage.
No.
And so maybe that's why Sophie's one that I played to there.
All right, so this concludes our mini-sode, me and Rusty Smith. If nothing else, drop a comment to tell him happy birthday, please. And and if you want to hear the rest of the debrief, it is the most recent full episode that we've posted, and go back and check that out. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, The Unfinished TBR. We've got an email, theunfinishedtbr@gmail.com. We're on YouTube, Spotify. Just come hang out with us. So we'll see you next time. Have a good week.